This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you for joining the City of Kingston's Common Council at our Laws and Rules meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 20th. My name is Andrea Schott, the Council President and organizer for our virtual meetings. Before we begin our meeting, I'd like to go over a few guidelines to help us navigate this meeting as efficiently and respectfully as possible. We ask the public and press remain muted and off camera for the length of the meeting. As organizer, I reserve the right to mute anyone who unmutes themselves. Council members and city staff will control their own mute button. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. If a council member or staff wishes to speak, they will raise their hands. The chairperson will call on them before they speak, stating their name clearly for our audio listeners. All of our meetings are recorded. Both video and written transcriptions will be made available to the public on the city's website at a later date. Although we will not have public speaking tonight, you can submit written comments to the City of Kingston Tinty at emtinty@kingston-ny.gov or by dropping them off at the drop box located outside the side door of City Hall. We also encourage you to reach out to committee chairs or your ward's representative at any time. If you have any audio issues, send a text message to the following number, 845-594-6120. I'll repeat this number again, but be aware that phone calls will not be answered during the meeting. The number to text is 845-594-6120. As the organizer for today's meeting, I reserve the right to lock and pause the meeting to eject anyone who has behaved inappropriately. Lastly, at tonight's meeting, we have in attendance Chair Alderman Jeffrey Ventura Morel, Alderwoman Rita Worthington, Alderman Patrick O'Reilly, Alderman Rennie Scott Childress, and Alderman Don Tollerman. Non-voting council members, Alderman Doug Hoop. City staff, Clerk Elisa Tinty, and Corp Counsel Dan Gardenstein. Thank you for your patience during these difficult times, and on behalf of the Common Council, I wish you and your family good health. I now turn the floor over to Chair Ventura Morel.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jeffrey Ventura Morel. It's 6:33, and I'll call this meeting to order. The first order of business is the Commissioner of Deeds. That communication was sent by City Clerk Elisa Tinty. Elisa, would you like to say?
Well, this is really just another one of the housekeeping things that go on in my office. So those who have been chosen to be Commissioner of Deeds throughout the city, they are expiring the end of June. So my office reaches out to every department to see who do you need to be a Commissioner of Deeds. I believe most of the aldermen are as well. So if your time has expired on June 30th, and if you wish to continue that, you need to come in and sign the oath again. That's all.
All right. Anyone on the question? Alderman Patrick O'Reilly.
Yeah, how do you know if you've expired or not?
You are probably on the list, which I don't know if she's included it. I think you expired. If you did it 2 years, it's up to 2 years. So only everybody expires, and the new people, they choose to first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Yes, Alderman Rennie Scott Childress.
I just move that we vote on this.
Yes. So the resolution I have is a resolution to establish Commissioner of Deeds list effective 7/1/2020 to 6/30/2022 as per attached. Alderman Scott Childress has moved. Is there a second? Rita Worthington, second. All in favor? Patrick, we can't see you. All opposed?
We need to collect votes from Don and Patrick.
Okay. Okay, so 5-0. Everybody was in favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Second item on the agenda is the seeker, the next step on the seeker process for the Wilbur Avenue repaving. And this is just, if you remember correctly, if you remember, we discussed, I think it was 2 months ago, 3 months ago, the Wilbur Avenue repaving. So this is, they have gone through the process, and the engineer sent a communication asking for us to declare type 2 action under the secret process. That means that there will be no significant environmental impacts due to this project. Anyone on the question? Okay, so I will read the resolution we have. A resolution that pursuant to 6 NYRCC Part 617, the City of Kingston Common Council hereby determines that the Wilbur Avenue repaving project is a type 2 action under seeker. Will have no potentially significant adverse environmental impacts, and hereby renders a negative declaration in connection with this action pursuant. Rennie Scott Childress motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Rita Worthington second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, 5-0, all in favor. Okay, the next item on the agenda we have was a communication that was sent by citizens. Let me give a little bit of a background here, because I've spoken to some people about this. So in 2018, the code was amended, the building code was amended to establish that a building permit should be revoked if no work was performed 6 months after the permit was issued. There's a site that citizens reported that no visible work had been done, and the response they got from the building department was that this code was arbitrary. It would be arbitrary and unreasonable to enforce the code in this instance because there was no precedent to it. So our question, the question that's being posed to us as lawmakers is, where is this requirement of that a new law has to have a precedent in order to be enforceable? Should we revise this law to make it enforceable if it is determined that it's not enforceable? And should we require the building department to inspect every site 6 months after a building permit was issued to confirm that work is being done? So on the question. Anyone? Yes, Alderman Worthington.
Has anyone spoken to the building department about this, or have we just received the communication from the public?
We received the communication from the public. I spoke to Corp Counsel about it, and I was informed that the building department under the code has discretion to determine what qualifies as work being done on the site.
Okay, so moving forward then, should there be a building where the permit expired after 6 months, that also would be in discretion of the building department whether to let it move forward or not? Or because if we're gonna, I mean, if it's done for one, I mean, I don't know how I feel about the building department having discretion to allow whether a permit expires or not, or if they have to do a new permit.
Right. Well, the code as it was, let me just look at this letter here. The code as it was amended, it is the Building Safety and Zoning Enforcement Chapter 172, Article 172-5 says, to a property owner about their building permit. Hold on, I'm reading this. Hold on, I have to look. Anybody else on the question while I look this section of the code up on the.
Well, Don, can I just finish?
Hey, Gordon, Sam, if I could just jump in for 1 second. The representations that are made in the letter are not either complete or accurate. What actually transpired was that the building department made a determination with regard to whether or not the permit would be deemed void. The Harveys then exercised their right to file an appeal of that determination. That appeal was referred to the Zoning Board of Appeals as is required under the code, which is the proper process. That appeal was scheduled to be heard by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the day of the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing, the Harveys withdrew their appeal. So they had an opportunity to present their argument to the Zoning Board of Appeals to argue that the building department should have declared the permit invalid, and they waived that right by withdrawing their appeal. The determination of the building department is not in any way the equivalent of saying that the code is unenforceable. The building department made a determination that in this particular case, based upon the work, based upon what was being done at the site, that they would not void this particular permit. And again, that was subject to an appeal. The appeal was scheduled, and the Harveys withdrew it.
Alderman Tellerman had his hand up, and then I'll come back to Alderwoman Worthington.
Thank you, but what Dan said just kind of muddied the water a little bit. You know, I think that we should be deciding, the question on a legal basis is, if we have a law and someone makes a complaint to say the law is not being enforced, I think that it's fair that an existing law be enforced. But I don't think that the building department needs to check to see if every building permit has been executed. It's just like, you know, there's a lot of people do a lot of, you know, if you don't cut your grass, the building department isn't going to check everybody's lawn. If they get a complaint, they'll check everybody's lawn and enforce the code that says you have to keep your lawn cut. So in the same way, I don't think we should expect the building department to be following up on every open permit. However, if there's a complaint made, then that's worth looking into. So on that basis, I'd say, yeah, you know, they should investigate. But what Dan just said, you know, there's a story here. You know, why did they withdraw? And, you know, he said in this particular instance, the building department made a determination to not enforce the code. Well, I'm sure they had their reasons. You know, so before we decide anything like this, we should find out more from them why they determined that.
Right, but I think the question here is not about this particular case, because I don't want to get into the whole background of what this instance is. What we are being asked to look into is whether in the building department's letter, they state that this portion of the code would be arbitrary and unenforceable in this instance. And what we're being asked to do, and what I'm asking us to consider, and maybe this is something that we come back to in the future, is to look at this portion of the code and determine why is it that it was determined to be unenforceable and arbitrary, and whether, if it is unenforceable and arbitrary, then us as lawmakers should look into amending it to make it viable to be enforced. Alderwoman Worthington, then President Schott, and then Alderman Scott Childress.
Jeffrey, I think I'm just stuck on, I keep hearing that it was unenforceable and arbitrary in this instance. So what about going forward? Or are we just looking at that code, whether we should amend that code so it would be enforceable for all permits going forward? Or was it just this instance? It was found to be arbitrary and unenforceable.
Right. Well, I'm just going by the letter that I'm seeing here from the building department. It says it's arbitrary and unenforceable because there's no precedent. Well, any new law by definition has no precedent.
Correct.
And if the issue, again, it's Dan Gartenstein, if the issue and if the appeal had gone forward in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Zoning Board of Appeals would have heard testimony from the building department with regard to why it was unenforceable in this instance, and legal arguments would have been presented to them by counsel for the Irish Cultural Center and by the Harveys. And then the Zoning Board of Appeals, pursuant to their jurisdiction and their authority, would have decided whether or not enforcement wasn't appropriate or was not appropriate in this instance. The real issue in this case was what constituted work being commenced. And there was a factual dispute as to whether or not work actually had commenced and what that term meant for this site. That was something for the ZBA to decide. The ZBA was prepared to decide it, and then the Harveys withdrew their appeal.
Okay. President Schott had her hand up.
Yeah, this is Andrea Schott, but I was just gonna basically say what Alderwoman Worthington said is, this is a relatively new law. This is really the first time that we know of that it's enforced, or not enforced, not enforced, is just to make sure that we're looking at it outside of just this one case, because I get that, there was the appeal was dropped. We understand that, but if this law isn't strong enough to be enforced or read clear enough to be enforced, as lawmakers, we should, consider that. And so I think it would be good outreach to maybe reach out to building safety and have a conversation about why this happens. In this case, will this happen again? Will it be unclear? Is the law, is there anything that we need to amend to make this law workable? So I don't know, maybe that's the next step in this.
Yes, I agree that this is something that we're just opening up the conversation. This is a conversation that we need to continue. Alderman Scott Childress had his hand up.
Yeah, I think the proper process here is that somebody needs to determine first whether there's an issue. And if there's no issue, there's no reason for us to be talking about it. If there's already a proper procedure, in other words, one that Dan Gartenstein laid out, then we don't need to do anything because there's clearly a way of adjudicating this already provided for. Last of all, we should be dealing with a piece of legislation rather than being judges about whether or not the claims made in this particular letter or any letter like it are valid or not. So that requires doing some research before bringing this to the council and framing these kinds of issues in terms of potential legislation. So I think, if there's anything to be done here, it should be done by one of us going and looking into it more deeply if any of us thinks there's an issue here. And then if one or more members of the council believe that there is need for legislation, that they bring that legislation forward and we have the proper discussion at that point.
I agree with that. Did I just hear you volunteer, Rennie?
Unless you're going to help me with my grading.
I'll reach out to the building department and find out more information about this. And so we'll keep this on the agenda for future reference for now. I just wanted to start the conversation and bring up to you what I've found so far and what communications have been sent. So this is to be continued. Moving on, we have, I think I saw her name around, Julie Noble is here. The next item on the agenda we have is the secret determination for the Kingston Open Space Plan. Hi,
Yeah,
Julie.
thank you. Hi, Jeffrey. How are you?
Good.
Great. So I wanted to put this on the agenda and just bring you all up to speed as to where this is and then understand how it will move forward from here. So last year in Resolution 192 of 2019, you created passed a resolution to undertake a coordinated review of adopting the open space plan into the plan. At that time, it was determined to be a type 1 action. And then from there, this year, you passed Resolution 36, 2020 to declare yourselves as lead agency. So from there, I, as the applicant, completed part 1 of the full environmental assessment form, which I've submitted. And I also drafted parts 2 and 3 for your completion. And so what needs to happen with that is that you all need to complete those or ask any questions that you may have and circulate that to all the involved agencies, and then make a determination of significance. And I guess it's on the agenda as a check-in to see where that is sitting, and if you have any questions. I'm not of the understanding that it's been circulated or completed, so I just wanted to understand where that is and keep this moving.
Yes. So I spoke to Corp Counsel today, and what he advised was that we pass a resolution basically acknowledging the receipt of parts 1, 2, and 3. Say we will read through and come up with questions of parts 2 and 3 to be addressed at our next meeting. And in the meantime, we will also ask that the documents be distributed to all the involved agencies.
Okay, great.
So did I miss anything, Dan?
Well, in the interest of moving the matter forward, Julie has circulated the documents to all members of the council. I don't know if anyone has had the opportunity to read through them, and if there are preliminary questions at this point, we certainly shouldn't waste the opportunity for those questions to be put to Julie. So either she can answer them now, or she can be prepared to answer them, going forward. The formal action that is needed tonight is what Jeffrey outlined. But again, the document was sent, I believe, earlier in the week, and if there are any preliminary questions, they should be asked. I would also urge any of you that have questions that come up between now and the next meeting and not wait until the meeting and to get them to Julie in advance so that she is prepared to answer them, with a little bit of notice.
And I just want a point of clarification there is that I submitted the documentation, thanks Dan, I submitted the documentation on the 23rd of April to President Schott. I did not circulate it to the entire council. That was not something I thought was my responsibility. So I submitted it as part of a communication to President Schott. So I'm not sure if the whole council has seen it or not.
Yeah, I believe it was attached as a item for tonight's agenda. So I think that on the agenda and for the public, it's already been posted and it's been made available.
Great, thanks.
On the question, Alderman Scott Childress.
There we go. Yes, kind of a general question at this point. As we're looking at this, since it's a plan, what are the criteria for deciding, because most of these have to do with environmental impact, which I take to mean, actual changes in the material world, if I may. So as a plan, it seems like to me there's very little here in terms of evaluating those kinds of changes that I would associate with the seeker process. So I don't see how this, for example, would really have an effect on groundwater or traffic. So I'm just wondering if you can give us a little guidance in thinking through the process of considering these questions.
You're absolutely right. And to reinforce that, as part of the comprehensive plan seeker process, it was specifically outlined in each chapter and each objective what the impact would be, the environmental impact. And it stated right in the comprehensive plan under the open space resources chapter, which was chapter 31, that no adverse environmental impacts are likely to result. And seeker was passed as part of the adopting of the comprehensive plan. So some could argue that this process is redundant, that what we're going through now, that it's already been accomplished through adopting the comprehensive plan, but this is a formality that I feel like we should be going through. But you're absolutely right that the plan itself is not going to have any impact itself on any of the traditional environmental concerns. So effectively, parts 1, 2, and 3 effectively say no impact, no impact, no impact to nearly every question.
Okay. And then one other question, if I may. If there was going to be some sort of development in any of the areas that are contemplated under the plan, that specific project would have to get a seeker of its own, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This
so this doesn't get rid of the more narrowly focused seeker process for any specific projects.
Absolutely. Every single site-specific modification would need to go through it if as necessary. This is literally just a seeker process that has to be done for the plan itself, the actual document.
Okay. Jeffrey, I think Dan Gartenstein wants to contribute.
Yes, Dan Gartenstein, sorry. You're muted, Dan.
And just to follow up on Rennie's question and for clarification, issuing a positive or negative deck under SECRA, which is basically a formulaic, inquiry. You have to go through all the questions that are set forth, the form that Julie prepared. You have to make a determination whether or not there's a positive or negative declaration is separate and apart from adopting the plan. Okay, it's a prerequisite to moving forward, but you still have to determine after the declaration whether or not you're going to adopt the plan.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else on the question? Okay, so what I have here is a resolution to acknowledge receipt of parts 1, 2, and 3 of the full environmental assessment form in relation to the Kingston Open Space Plan, and to distribute all documents to all involved agencies. Hold on, Rennie. Dan, do you have anything to add?
Yes, and just for clarification, the resolution, once it's adopted by this body, will be sent to the council. The council will vote on it at the June meeting. As most of you are aware, our practice is, in order to avoid any delay and in order to give the involved agencies more than adequate time to comment upon the passing of your committee report, we forward we anticipate passage by the entire council, and we forward the documents to the involved agencies as soon as possible rather than waiting until June.
Yes. Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Scott Childress. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Tellerman. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Bye, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, Julie.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Okay, next, now we're moving on to old business, and we have the commercial vacancy tax. Alderman Tellerman, did you want to give us an update on that? You're mute.
Hi, okay, thank you. So the vacancy tax, we are doing our homework to make sure that no one can say that we didn't consider this, consider that. So I'm doing quite a bit of research. President Schott is assisting a little bit, which is great. And we just want to make sure that we cover all bases. And I hope to distribute something to the committee before our next meeting for you to review, so that next month we'll have a substantial conversation about it. And that's the plan.
Yes, President Schott.
This is Andrea Schott. Don has been working hard and doing the research and finding like municipalities who've done this, and it hasn't been easy because there haven't been a lot. So he's doing good work doing the research, and I just wanted to tell him I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, Don. Okay, does anybody have any questions? So we'll move on. Okay, so this is again to be continued. So moving on to the next agenda item, that is the mobile food truck legislation. We discussed it a little bit at our last meeting. I've been working with Don, with Alderman Tallerman, and Dan Gartenstein has also assisted. And I like the legislation that is presented. We had some questions about the fee. I think that was the next question we were going to bring up to the committee. If you think this new fee is reasonable, but what I think this addresses is the fact that mobile food vendors should go through the same types of inspections that a regular restaurant is. This is not about putting on reasonable fees to penalize them, but to make sure that the public is safe when they purchase food from these places. I've looked at a lot of similar legislations, Portland, Denver, Orlando, Kansas, nearby cities, Saugerties, Hudson, Rochester, Syracuse. They all have similar policies to this that I found. So I think this is a good idea. Don, do you have anything to add?
I think we want to encourage people to, I think I'm of the opinion that food trucks are good. They add to our street life. People that want to get into the hospitality or restaurant business who can't afford a restaurant, they can try their hand at a food truck. We have at least, 8 or 10 of them in the area. So the idea is to encourage them, but to make it so we have some rules and some, some, that's not just a free for all. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to review legislation and have any specific questions or about points or paragraphs that you'd like to ask questions about or discuss.
Alderwoman Worthington had her hand up, and then Alderman Scott Childress.
Actually, I didn't. Alderman Scott
Scott.
Children could go. A question is coming, though, I'm sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Rennie?
I'm wondering how do we assess whether the truck is in Kingston? So, for example, some trucks might come in for Italian Day, drive in from, say, Kerhonkson. Do they have to get the same license, or is there a visiting license? Is the license only for those trucks that are in a consistent spot? How do we police this is another related question.
Dan Gartenstein?
Yeah, my first question, and I'll respond to Rennie in a second. I'm looking online, Don, and the version of this that is online, I don't believe is the final version that you are proposing. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. The version that he's proposing was submitted yesterday. I forwarded it to Elisa, but I don't know. I checked online and it didn't seem like it had made it there.
Okay, and in terms of,
It's not in the agenda packet, it's in the agenda. But
Okay.
okay, so in terms of enforcement, Rennie, technically, according to the last language that I saw, any mobile food vehicle that is selling food within the city of Kingston would need a license. You've raised an issue with regard to vehicles that are normally housed outside of the city and brought into the city. Whether Don, as the proponent of the legislation, wants this applicable to those trucks or not is something that he should clarify, and then you should all decide. In terms of enforceability, it's enforceable the same way any other section of the code is enforceable, either by the Building Safety Division or the Police Department, basically receiving a complaint and contacting the vendor and asking the vendor, do you have a license? And if they don't, presumably issuing an accusatory instrument or giving them a warning and telling them to go get one.
Okay. And then, I mean, the version that I'm looking at, I think, is the old version. So if there have been changes, I apologize, but I see that there's a $500 initial fee. And then
no, that was updated in the updated version, which is what I wanted to. Sorry to interrupt you, Rennie.
Sure.
In the updated version, the annual fee would be $100, and then $100 a year.
Rennie and Dan Gartenstein, I just forwarded you the updated text. You want to refresh your inbox?
Okay.
Anyone else on the question? So two things I really like about this. One is that it provides for basically that people are not throwing trash everywhere. It requires them to have a place to put their trash, to have a source of clean water and things like that. Also, for those of us who were on public safety, I think it was about a year ago, we received some complaints about the noise from ice cream trucks. This also has a clause in there that says ice cream trucks can have their music or jingle playing while they are moving, but not while they're stationary. I think that addresses that concern that we had gotten from a lot of constituents back then. I don't know if anybody's ready to move on this, or is this something that we want to keep discussing? Alderwoman Worthington?
Yeah, reading the legislation, I like how it reads. Just I have a mobile food truck in my ward on Broadway and Franklin Street. And I've been trying to get down there, trying to talk. Actually went down there today to try to talk to him, but he wasn't there. And under the general provisions on letter B of the legislation, where it talks about any food truck cannot be, where does it read here? Stay in one place for more than 24 hours. I think that might, I just need to speak to my guy up here and just find out, does he move that truck or does it stay there? I think there might be an issue. I don't know about other people that may have issues with being not able to move their truck after 24 hours. And so if this is his source of income, but he's not able to move that truck, then I need to know that. I want to find out.
Well, yes, I think Dan was going to answer, but I also had a similar concern regarding, as part of the CDBG, we approved a mobile kitchen for the YMCA, which would basically be a trailer kitchen that would be stationed at their park. So I had the same concern, and I think Dan Gartenstein will address that.
Yeah, and Rita, I'm not sure if you're looking at the updated version or you're looking at the original version. The second half of paragraph B, which is now included, indicates that vehicles on private property must apply for special approval from the Kingston Planning Board if the mobile food vehicle will stay in one place for more than 24 hours. And there's an additional provision later on that also defers that issue to the planning board. I can tell you that the truck that you are referring to is regularly considered and addressed by the planning board in the context of site plan review. And it does in fact stay parked for more than 24 hours, but it does so with oversight by the planning board.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
And Jeff, just for clarification, in terms of the YMCA truck, the same provision would apply because it would be parked on private property. Y will be going in front of the planning board, or I believe already has, for site plan approval to have that stationed at that spot consistently, and it is on private property.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else on the question? Patrick O'Reilly? You're mute, Pat.
Thank you, Jeffrey. You know, the food trucks are interesting because they're interesting in a lot of ways. And one thing they do is they bring in revenue into our city, which is a wonderful thing. And you know, they don't have to. They can drive their truck somewhere else. They can go to Albany. They can go out to town of Ulster. They don't need us in Kingston. So we got to think about that. We need the revenue, maybe more than they need us. So let's not scare these people off with high fees. Penalties that they can't pay. You know, how much is a cheeseburger or a taco? $5? You want to charge these guys $350, $500? I mean, that's a week's worth of pay. That's a week's pay. This is crazy. Let's not punish these people for wanting to come and bring these interesting vehicles into our town. We need to relook at. I like what's going on. I like the structuring. I don't think we necessarily need it. Most of this stuff is already in place. So all we're doing is rewriting something that's already in place, most of it, I would imagine. But I imagine there's some things that are not in place. I'd like to know the difference about what we're actually changing here and what we had before. It's not like we didn't have food trucks before. They're here. They've been here. What actually is changing here? Is it the fees? I mean, is it the 24-hour thing? It almost seems like we're targeting a couple food trucks in our city here with this rhetoric that's been placed down with the 24-hour thing. It seems like we need to be careful here. We don't want to scare these people off. I know the $100 fee, that's more than the county gets. Why don't we go even with the county? Why don't we get to pay the same, make these people pay the same fees? They have to pay more in Kingston than they do in Ulster County to put their truck up. I think that's a mistake. So I think we need to take a look at the fees. I think we need to take a look at these fines, which seem outrageous. You know, think about the business these people are in. Like Don said, this is $5 a pop business, $10 a pop, $15 a pop business, right? And we're going to charge them $250 for the first fine that they ever get. We're going to wipe them out. They're going to have to leave. They'll never come back. So let's be careful here. Let's not scare these people off, as you wouldn't scare a little person off from opening a little stand in front of their house and trying to sell lemonade. Not today, we can't do that, but in the days past, we could. We have to be conscious of what these vehicles actually are. Jeffrey, do they have to be safe and healthy? Absolutely. Get the health department in there. They already are. What are we going to be doing? What are we going to be doing differently now than the health department was doing before? Probably not much. They probably go in, they inspect, they do what they need to do. So what are we really doing here if we're not doing much different with the health wise. It seems like we're putting a new fee schedule in to get rid of some of these people. That's what it seems like to me. I think we need to be very careful, and I'm very cautious that this is not to help these people. Thank you very much.
I believe Alderman Tallerman had something to say. Yeah, I think we should put it up for the committee to come up with the fees and to agree on the fees that we think are reasonable, because you're right, we don't want to scare people off from doing business. Alderman Tallerman, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Patrick, about the we don't want to scare people, and I'd be completely open to having lower fees for people who make mistakes and have offenses. I didn't know that Ulster County has a fee that's for their. I wasn't aware of that. But if it's $50, I think the idea is not the money. The idea is not to raise revenue. The idea is that we didn't have this before. So you asked about what's different. Yes, the health department has to make sure that that they're complying with health issues, but we've never said that they can't stay in one place forever. We've never said that they shouldn't have trash cans. The ice cream truck, it can just stay in one place and play its music, for an hour. We just want to have some civility and some uniformity and make sure that we have recourse if people don't follow the rules, that we can enforce things. So clearly don't want to scare people up, want to make this easy, but do want to have some parameters that we can control things.
Anyone else on the question? Alderwoman Worthington?
Yeah, as stated previously, I'd like to speak to our vendor here down the street. And, with regard to what Pat said about fees, I'm just getting a chance to really look at these fees with the violations, the additional fees that would be added. That may need to be revisited because, some of the vendors and the food trucks, they come in, this might be extra money for them, but others, this might be a way of life for them, a way of living. So I don't want to put, unfortunately, there is a disparity. And so I don't think we can apply all the rules to everyone at the same time, because it just doesn't work like that, especially when it comes to money and it comes to fees. So, one mobile food truck person may be able to handle these fees and someone else may not be able to handle it. So I don't know how we decide on that, but I think we need to be careful about attaching additional fees.
Don Gartenstein had something to say.
Just for clarification, and we've had this discussion in a number of different areas. We need to be careful to recognize the difference between a fee and a fine. A fee is something that is imposed by the council for operating or for the permit. A fine is something that can only be imposed by a judge after a judge determines that it is appropriate given the nature of the violation. The fines that are set forth here are consistent with the fines that are set forth throughout the code for violations. And again, the circumstances under which fines are imposed are, up to the city court judge only after all the circumstances are reviewed. I can honestly tell you in, 8 years in Kingston City Court, I have never seen a judge impose the maximum or even close to the maximum fines that are set forth in the code. Generally, the judge's approach and the judge's disposition is advising the defendant to correct the violation and giving them some sort of adjournment contemplating dismissal contingent on compliance. With regard to the actual fee, which is the $100, it should be consistent with the rest of the fees that are contained within the code. The way the rest of the code reads, it says a fee in an amount to be determined by the Common Council in the fee schedule. And if you recall, the fee schedule is something that you address every year at budget time. So the proper language would refer to the fee schedule, and then in the fee schedule, you decide what that amount would be, whether that would be $100 or $50.
So Dan, if we move with this, the people would not start paying the fee until after the next budget process?
No, if you move on this contemporaneously with adopting this new subsection, the Finance Committee would have to revisit the fee schedule to amend it to include whatever fee you deem is appropriate for a food truck. So it's a two-step process.
Alderman Scott Childress.
I'm looking at Saugerties, the Saugerties Village Code. Their annual fee is $250, and their first offense for not having the appropriate decal is $500. Fine for the second offense is $1,000. So at the rates we're looking at, every truck in Saugerties is coming to Kingston.
Rennie.
Hudson has even higher fees also, by the way. President Schott.
Hi, Andrea Schott. I was just, Dan, kind of jumping on what you were saying. I don't know if this is something that you could answer. Okay. When they are going to court, consider, if this is a first income, second income, I mean, do you think that would be something, because what Alderwoman Worthington said really struck a bell with me is there's a very big difference between if this is your first or only income or this is your second income, and how much earning they're making from their business, especially if this is their only income. With that, is that in your professional opinion, I guess? Do you think that's something that is considered by the judges and courts? Or is that something that you can't really answer here?
Well, the first issue is one of prosecutorial discretion, which is my discretion as the prosecutor. And I do not ask for fines of any significant amount under these circumstances. The focus is always on compliance, and that goes for any kind of violation ranging from a building code violation to to the kind of violation you're speaking about, to a landscaping violation. Our focus in city court is always compliance. The judge rules on what fine is appropriate after I, as the prosecutor, make a request. And if I'm not requesting a fine of that amount, the judge doesn't impose it.
Oh, and then speaking of ice cream trucks, you couldn't time.
Why am I more ice cream all of a sudden?
I think that's mine.
And then for the fee, I mean, I think we're all kind of saying we would rather start on the lower side, because if we revisit the fee schedule, it's every year, right? And we could make adjustments to that. So start low and keep an eye on how the food trucks are doing, and but Don, you said there's 8 to 10 food trucks currently?
That's anecdotal. I don't know the actual number.
Okay, so I mean, that's easy to kind of track, and just to make sure that everything is staying equitable, and that everybody could afford this and still thrive. But yeah, I mean, I would be for doing this, but just keeping the fees low and reasonable so that we don't scare anybody away. And we could always revisit it in the next fee schedule vote.
Dan Gartenstein, and then Rennie Scott Childress.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For clarification, Andrea, you can revisit the fee schedule at any time. You don't need to wait until the budget time. Anytime you want to revisit the fee schedule, all you have to do is make a motion.
All right, and I know we have done that, so I am aware of that, but I'm just thinking like we do also come to it every year, so yeah, thank you though.
Rennie.
Great. Thank you. I think that especially given comparison with what we see in Saugerties Village, that that the fee here is set at a good level. And I think that the crucial thing here is that this is the sort of thing that lets folks know that they've got to be in compliance with health code, with other laws of the city. It's a form of communication, and you want to have fines that are set at such a level that people won't simply flaunt them. And so I think that the crucial thing is that you've got the fee set fairly low at $100 per year. And that should be, I think, acceptable to most anybody who wants to run a food truck as a permanent business here in Kingston.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Yeah, I'm on the phone with someone who owns a food truck right now, and they say in any event we do in Saugerties does not require a city permit. So I think we need to take a
And
look.
they're just wrong because I just looked at it.
Well, this is what a guy who has a beautiful truck just told me, and I think we need to look at this a little longer. I think we need to table this. I think we need to look at these fines. I need to look at the fee. I think it could be a good thing going forward, but I think we just don't know all the information. I think we should just give this a little more time, let people have input. I know this person I'm speaking to did not know about this legislation going forward, has not spoken to anyone, and would surely like to speak to us about it. So I'm sure there's other vendors that would too. Unless this is some kind of emergency, I say we table this thing until we can get more information. I know Rita has a person who's going to be pushed out of her neighborhood if this goes into effect. So, and we surely don't want that to happen, especially right now.
So is that a motion, Patrick?
Yeah, motion to table it, please.
Okay, there's a motion to table on the table. Do I have a second?
Well, there's no motion
Second.
to table. We haven't passed it yet.
Right. So we could table or we could postpone the vote.
Well, tabling is, we would have to pass it first. We can just
Let's
hold off.
postpone the vote.
Yeah, that's just an informal point.
Okay. And then Rita had something to add?
I would be interested in hearing from some of our food truck vendors.
Okay.
The legislation that's going forth, the fines, while I don't think that they're excessive, that's me. So, but I don't run a food truck. And so I would be interested in hearing from the food vendors. And also I thought I heard it from Alderman O'Reilly that the county also assesses fees. So are we assessing fees on top of that, or are we getting, or, you know, that might be an issue too, if we're putting fees on top of what the county is also charging.
Okay, Alderman Scott Childress.
I'd like to point out that a $100 annual fee comes out to $8.03
Yep.
per month.
Yep.
So, you know, hardly onerous.
Mm-hmm. Maybe for you, Rennie.
Right, but I mean, that's, you know, that's one sale in a month. So.
Yes, President Schott.
I think just hearing the conversation that maybe a good next step would be to reach out to some of the vendors and see if they could supply us written comments to get to the committee, and then that we could look through it and come back next month and take it from there. As I said, if anybody has, you know, Rita has mentioned the person in her ward. I don't know if that's something really that you could go and talk to him, see if he wants to do that, but or him or her, sorry, I shouldn't assume, but if anybody the other or is willing to go to some of the other food trucks in the area and just ask for some comments and bring it back to the committee, and then you could take it from there, my suggestion.
It's fine.
Okay. That
Sure.
sounds reasonable. Anything else on the question? All right, so moving on, we'll revisit this pending more research. And the last order of old business is the Charter Commission. Did everybody get my email? I sent it out about 5:30. I know it was little notice, but that was President Schott forwarded a document from the New York Department of State. Sorry.
Yeah, it's
Division-
called revising city charters by New York State, or in New York State by the Department of State.
Thank you.
Yeah, you want me to?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I know I had that on the top of my head. So, yeah, I did send that today without expectation of you reading the whole. I think it's 24 pages long. Although I do think that at some point it would be helpful for everybody to read through it. The part that I had highlighted is on page 4, and that kind of puts us in the first steps of charter reform, or the conversations of charter reform. So a few things that I've learned recently, our charter, the Kingston Charter, does not include a provision to establish a charter commission. So this means it's mandatory for Kingston, for us, to set out a process following state law, because our charter doesn't tell us how to do it. We must follow the state law to do this. So this kind of gives us the chart that I sent to you, or Jeffrey sent to you, kind of outlines all the steps. So the part that I highlighted on page 4, it goes over what a charter commission may be, how it may be established. There are 3 procedures found in this section. It's section 36 of Municipal Home Rule Law. That would be the first step that the council takes, as how to proceed with this. So my recommendation, though, after reading this and doing some research, is this is a really big moment. None of us have ever done any of this before. What I'm recommended, if the committee is okay and the chair is okay with it, is if I could arrange somebody who is an expert to come and discuss charter reform and what the steps are. I mean, like I said, this does outline like the 3 different options that we have to start it. But then if we have somebody who could answer more eloquently than I can, because I've been doing the research, but I'm not anywhere near an expert, so I'm not gonna be able to answer everybody's questions. So that's kind of what I'm recommending. And then we decide after discussion and after getting our questions answered, which of those 3 procedures we want to go with. But I don't know if anybody has any questions on what I've kind of learned so far, or if you just want to wait for next month and see if I can get somebody to come in and talk with us.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, I would really appreciate having somebody come and speak to us who knows more about it than we can leading this.
Okay.
Alderman Tellerman.
Who could speak? Who would be the type of person who would be a good candidate to speak on the subject?
Before COVID-19, I did reach out to the Department of State to see if this is something that would be up, in their purview to do, to come in. And now it might even be easier because it's a conference call to have somebody come and speak on it, or NICOM, or I have had a conversation briefly with Jerry Benjamin of the Benjamin Center. He has gone through this process at a different angle, but those are some options that I was going to research.
Might be good to have a couple of people representing different angles.
I'll reach out and see what I hear back.
Sounds good.
Right.
Sounds good. Anyone else on the question? Okay, So that concludes our agenda for the day.
Chairman Morrell, can I just going back to the legislation for the food trucks? So will we revisit this at the next meeting?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Very good.
We'll gather public comments and then revisit.
Okay.
Anyone else before we conclude? Okay. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? I think Patrick already left us. All right. So thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Right.
Good night, all.
Night.